Padilla.
Like tortilla.
There you go. There you go. What's up? I'm so happy to have you on here.
Yeah. No chat.
Great. Yeah, this is really great. For once, we're gonna talk about content and specifically audio content.
Yes.
Very cool. Why don't you get started and tell everyone a brief but amazing intro?
Oh no, now you got pressure.
Yeah, pressure. Come on. I believe in you.
So, hi everybody. My name's Lindsay Padilla. I love proudly wearing the label as an accidental entrepreneur because I was a professor, full-time, tenure track, that was my dream job. And I accidentally started a business. And here we are 4 years later, leaving that job, taking my husband with me, who was also in the same profession. So we've been bumbling along for the last 4 years, but I loved teaching people how to teach. And when I realized I could translate that into an online business, I've basically for the last 4 years been helping people create courses and helping them teach better online, see themselves as educators, serve their students in all those ways. And within the last year, it's been about a year now actually, I came up with this idea for a software. And so it's really cool from the perspective of like, you know, having a consulting company, one-on-one work, doing a training course, you know, business, and then realizing there's like a big need actually to help people, to help students really finish courses and actually consume content. And that was always a problem that people had. And so it came to us where we wanted to solve our own problem in our own course, where it's like, how could we just like get people to like watch the videos? And it turned out that watching was the problem in of itself. And when I thought like, why aren't there just a podcast feed of my content? And it was kind of one of those moments where you're like, why has no one thought of this? Why doesn't it exist? And we sat on it for a while because I was like, maybe there's a reason why it doesn't exist yet. Maybe there's a problem with it or whatever. And so after doing some research, we realized that delivering a private podcast feed to our customers actually helped them finish the course better, re-listen to relevant content that they wanted to re-listen to. And it actually helped them overcome some objections in the early buying process. A very common one in purchasing a course is, well, I don't have time to watch the videos or to make the live calls. And so we say, oh, cool, we have this awesome podcast feed. So you can kind of binge it and don't take any action. I don't want you to do any action or like create anything. Just go listen. And they're like, oh, okay. And they didn't have a response to that. And so that kind of was the beginning of HELLOOO Audio when we realized how helpful it was for our own students. So yeah, pretty cool.
I love that. And I remember when you first posted it, I messaged you and I was like, God damn, I wish I would have thought of this.
I heard that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool idea. And you know, that's my whole thing is like changing content to different formats and using it in different ways. So I was just immediately like, oh, like huge nerd alert, but I was excited.
Yeah.
And I remember like when we first met, I think when we first met in person was at Russell Brunson's ClickFunnels thing.
Correct.
Yeah, and that was quite a while ago. I think it's like 2017 maybe?
Yeah. Was it 2017 or 2018? It
was one of those two.
One of those two. Yeah, it all blends
I'm going to go with 17 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember you said something to Gary Vee, and was that...
Yeah, I got to talk to him.
Yeah, you did. Can you remind me what that was about? Because I feel like it was the beginning of your journey.
It really was. It was early stage in my business. I think so. Part of my story of like deciding to leave my tenure track job was also selling everything we owned. And that kind of funded the early days of that business. And so, I very well might have been living in Mexico, flying out to that event. Emily had just had her baby and we were there. Yeah. So I was realizing that I was a very unique person in the academic world, and there was a lot of professors that I was like, hey, they could do this. And so basically I asked him that question, should I go that route or should I stay like courses? And what has happened since then, 3 years out is, I still really speak to that audience, and I've started to create less of a personal brand and more of a, the company is now called Wealthy Teachers. And so it is this idea of, hey, maybe some teachers in the education system are bigger than the walls of the institution, which is how I felt. Which now, looking at everything that's happening with COVID, it's really like, and how education is changing. You know, there's some space there for conversations that I could help people kind of leave that profession that isn't taking very good care of them. And so, yeah, so that was really a big turning point for me. It's funny that you bring that up and that's where we met, is because I actually, when I talk about audio content, I hear him. Do you remember his talk that day? It was, you know, it was 20 minutes. He probably got paid like what, like $1 million or something.
Yeah, totally.
But it was all about like how to spot trends and innovations. And he talked about that, like, content can only be consumed in 3 ways. It's audio, it's by listening, it's by reading, or it's by watching. And he was talking about the future of AI and Alexa, and he was going all in on audio. And he's like, maybe video has not had its heyday, it just goes in these trends. And that was a big moment for me too. I was like, oh, and he just, like, you know, watching him and what he's been able to create, but just this idea of, oh, here's somebody who tries to see the future. And he kind of talked about that a little bit. And his talk stuck with me in the decision to actually move forward with Hello Audio and this as a software, because I was like, it hasn't really had its heyday. Like, when podcasting came out, gosh, it's been out like at least 10 years now, I want to say, maybe even a little more, podcasting, and it hasn't changed. It's one of the last industries that has stayed very like decentralized, very like open source. Podcasters weren't really trying to monetize, and now they're all starting to kind of be like, oh, like, we can make money. But ads and like figuring out who's listening, like, people are literally right now figuring that out, which is kind of crazy. And so when I thought about his talk around that, I was like, oh, we're on to something. And while we didn't come up with anything super brand new, what's really interesting that I think is relevant to people listening when it comes to like potentially, you know, launching a software or a new service is like, how can we serve a market better, like, using this? And so we're a podcast hosting company, really. It's bare bones, and there's a lot of them. It's a somewhat competitive market now. But what I realized was they're all marketing and talking to podcasters. That's it. And so there's people trying to help you monetize your podcast. But we are like, oh, what about content creators who don't see themselves as podcasters? And that's where I was just like, just that angle in marketing, we're doing the exact same thing that Libsyn is doing, but we're doing it better. And we're doing it for creators in the way that they need it. And they're thinking about, oh, I already have content that I've created that people aren't consuming. I can give them another avenue to consume. So they're not having to launch a brand new podcast or anything like that. They're literally repurposing what they've already done. And that's when it hit me. And it was like, no one's done this, because they're focused on, I think with courses, like, people are trying to justify spending $1,000 on a product, right? And like so they're like, oh, it has to be fancy videos and good worksheets and a cool learning system, and there's points and there's Q&A calls. So they dump all this stuff, and it's like, cool. If your people aren't logging in and like consuming, it doesn't matter how much money it is, right? And so I started to be like, why can't they just get it quickly? Like, and most of the people that I was helping with their courses, they weren't even teaching like visual things. They're talking heads. Like, they're not showing them how to run through Ads Manager. That's like not what everyone's course is like. Some people's courses are literally, hi, I have some things to teach you. And they make these fancy slides. And that's great. And slides help in some ways. But the problem is like actually sitting there and watching. So yeah, this idea of like audio having a revolution right now is something that made me want to actually launch Hello Audio.
I love that. It's such a cool idea, and so specific. You know,
yeah,
one of the things I love that about business nowadays. You know, you can literally come up with the tiniest, weirdest angled business for like just a weird niche of people, and it's a business because you just need to find where to find all these people. And this is like super specific. It's a really specific thing, but
specific. But these people spend money, right? They're like, oh, I have so many products that I pay $10 a month for, like just add it to the list, right? Because they're welcoming in, you know, hopefully like lots of customers. And so they can justify that cost. And they're like, oh, if my customers are happy, right? Like I'm actually in the business. Hello Audio is in the business of helping you delight your customers, right? Mm-hmm. So you join Hello Audio to be like, I want to look like a badass. Like I want to help my people get results. I care about them. And so you buy my product for me to help that, you know, help your people, which is kind of a cool way to think about how I'm serving, you know, people with the software.
For sure, because you were just saying, you know, people spend a lot of money on a lot of times on video production, you know, I mean, it's not always just getting in front of your laptop somewhere or your phone and being like, doodly do. It's people spend a lot of money, and then they spend money for a designer to do up all their worksheets and everything like that. And then maybe paying like for someone to split off the audio of their video. And then they put that as like, let's talk about that for a second, because when you first told me about this, I was like, I can just split off the video and the audio and just put a link. Like, so tell me why this is better than that.
And I think this is the cool part where the teacher in me comes in. People will talk about learning styles and all that stuff. So PS, learning styles are totally debunked. Like we don't really have, we have preferences, but we have preferences and they may not be helpful to us. So that's a side caveat. But yeah, in most courses, what you see right now is there's a video and then you can download the worksheet below it. And there's an MP3 file that you can download and there's a transcript. And so everyone's like, oh, I'm meeting my students where they're at. And I'm like, great. When was the last time you downloaded MP3 yourself as a student? And like, where did it go? Was it in the right order? Like, you know, all like, how did it play on your phone? Oh, did your phone turn off when you like were trying to listen to it? Like, it's just, it's no one, like we gave it to them, but we didn't really like step back and say, wait, no one's actually using the MP3, or we're not making it accessible for them to like download it. It's not named correctly. I mean, so many problems. Lots of people post, Dropbox links to recordings. Dropbox is not an audio player. It is literally horrific. And I always cringe because you're just like, we can't use this. It is not practical and it wasn't meant for that. And you can't move it's so bad. So who's already figured this out? Oh, it's called podcasting. And you can completely control as a user the preferences for the speed. It comes, you know, in order. You can save them. You know, whatever, you're alerted when there's a new one. Like, it's like, oh, that was already figured out, right? And your phone knows how to play it like in order once you figure out the nuances of your own personal app. But like, it will play in order. And that was like bingo. And then it was like, okay, why is not anyone doing this? And it was this rabbit hole of, password protection and the way RSS feeds work. But most podcast hosting companies now have private feeds as an option. And so it took a while for the private feed thing. And then companies started popping up that were like, hey, we'll help you monetize your audience with a private podcast that they'll pay for. And that's great. There's some problems with that conversion. And I have thoughts on that. The audience is listening to something they've listened to for free. The like thought that they have to pay for something else. It's a little awkward. Podcast users, listeners, and producers it's a different industry. And so like you said, the hyper niche I went to is digital marketers. So we're the podcast hosting company for digital marketers who realize that they already have content. They don't have to create anything new. They already have people buying their other things. You're just giving them another avenue to consume, a preference for them, supplemental to something you've already created. Now, of course, you could totally create private feeds that are unique and all that stuff. But this idea that everyone watching, I mean, this is a content show, has something that they could probably give an audio feed to support, your people are going to love you. And it actually helps you stand out in the market because they're like, how innovative. Oh my gosh, this was exactly what I'm looking for. And when I post about it on Facebook, people are like, oh, I wish, Amy Porterfield's course was on this, or I wish this course was on this. And now I'm like, yes, like that's the deal. Like, we want to be the standard where you're just expected to have a private audio feed for your course. That actually takes it to the next level.
I love that. 100%. I agree. That just brings something extra. And one thing I want to say is that this conversation is super honest about like the things that we don't usually talk about of, you know, the courses and the Dropbox thing. And I got to play it on my iTunes, you know, which I don't use. So it's like,
no, iTunes
it has to like resurrect itself somewhere on my laptop so that it can play.
It just randomly plays like out of nowhere. Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah.
So like it's almost like there's this conversation that no one's been having because everyone just wants to dump whatever and just be like, oh, I've given them all these ways to learn, I'm out. Yeah. But it's not actually helpful, and it's like admitting something, right? Right now it's like, well, I guess my course, you know, I just dumped it there and I didn't really think about it.
Yeah.
And this gives you
or it's their responsibility to show up for themselves. That we hear a lot. Like, if you want this, why aren't you making the time? And it's like, it's that and how can you meet them where they're at? Yeah.
If you want this, you'll download Dropbox again and sign up for a paid plan because the file's too big, and you'll like, why are we doing all of this? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, let's talk about use cases real quick, because that's exciting to me. Let's talk about the types of things.
Yeah, and I think this will be really good for the users as well. So clearly educational content is kind of one of the biggest use cases, right? So not only courses, but group programs, masterminds, membership sites, even audiobooks. Instead of having to go through Kindle and having to do Audible, like what if you, an order bump was your audiobook or the audio version of something. So lots of cool stuff with education content, and that's pretty obvious, right? So I usually start with that. And it's really actually why I created the product, was education content. Which is cool. So as a creator, you likely already have this stuff that's just waited to be stripped. And you brought that up, the stripping piece of the audio from video. So when the software comes out, phase 2 will have the auto stripping. So we're now creating basically software that will strip for you and create transcripts. So we want to be the one-stop shop to kind of create content for your people that's consumable. And you only need to have our software to be able to do that. So that's really cool. You'll be able to drag in a YouTube video, provide a link, a Vimeo, Zoom, it'll connect with all of those. We're working towards that, but that is the vision of the product. And so we cut out that VA actually, which will be definitely an angle in my marketing. But then the next category or use case is event recording. So we're getting a lot of people that are launching summits, and I would say that's a very popular category right now for Hello Audio users. And it's because summits are jam-packed on purpose, right? Because they want you to buy the all access pass. And so the podcast feed becomes another value add that was never before in summits, where people are like, oh, I don't have to log in and watch a video and have Facebook notifications happening at the same time, right? Like that distraction, I can put in my earbuds, do a second task, and consume the thing that I really wanted to consume. And I like summits, but they're hard because part of you, I remember in the early days of my business, I want to watch every single one, right? I have 30 to watch. That is a commitment, and it's tiring and exhausting. But even if you make it through all of that, there are only a few of them that are any good, right? And so to be able to have a podcast feed that you can be like, oh yeah, I'm watching Lindsay's again. I took so many notes. I know I'll have nuggets. And I think that way of using it, and we had a user, Anna Saucier, who's the first person to launch a summit using Hello Audio. She actually created a downsell. So she, after the summit, all the access pass is done, she goes, hey, maybe that wasn't the right time, but you caught a couple and you really wish you bought everything. How about I just give you the podcast feed for $30 or something like that? And she closed a ton of sales that way. And I think that kind of thing is cool. So this idea of using, audio content that's already created, it just creates another opportunity, a bonus, a value add for our current product. So event recordings, other ones that fall under event recordings are things like Q&A calls, potentially one-on-one clients, like really high-level one-on-one clients, retreats, those kind of things, any public speeches you give or something like that, like whatever your thing is, there's likely a feed that you could create for your people, whether free or paid, that just gives them access to you in their ear. So those are the first two. So we have education content, event recordings, and then we get into I call it just like marketing, which is a lot. But this is where I think, digital marketers are going to get really creative, and we're already seeing that. Emily Hirsch is a Hello Audio user, and she did a pop-up podcast. And when I promoted it for her, so many people were like, thank God it's not a webinar. Like, they just love this idea of like, thank you that I don't have to show up to this like cookie cutter thing. And so I think that unique, innovative side really lends well to like converting customers and getting people to trust you, because they're like, oh, she's no bullshit, or like she gets that I'm busy. And that's how you want to be seen in the eyes of your customer. So people are using it for launches. They're using it for, maybe even like master classes or webinars. Like, what if you followed up with like, hey, go to this podcast feed. It will end up in your podcast player. Because again, you're not giving them login to anything. It's something that they can just like literally in like 2 buttons, they're playing it, right? That is huge. And you take away that friction point, again, it's all about consumption in these things. The PLF video launches that are like 30 minutes, it's just like, oh yeah, we could make this a hell of a lot easier. So I think I'm going to start seeing some really cool stuff that I haven't even thought of. Like I was mentioning, order bumps, upsells, like how can you add to your value stack and create that idea of value? And I think, giving people a way to easily access something, again, that's like kind of already created, you're just adding more value to them, and it makes your product look that much better.
Yeah, definitely. So that's given me tons to think about. And I'm sure that you're still having fun with like coming up with these new use cases.
Yeah. And just like as more people start using our product, for sure.
I really like the idea of the order bump. I really like talk to me a little bit about the difference between, because this is what probably had me take longer to get used to the idea of this concept.
Sure.
Like free podcast, because we're putting out all this content, and then to get people to buy our products, and then the idea of free versus paid content, like this concept. I just talk about it a little bit more, because I think that's the thing that took me the longest to get my head around.
Yeah. And I think there is some things to be thinking about around this, right? Because we're taking something that was completely and solely considered free, which is podcasting, and as a front end marketing piece. And just to your point, we're repositioning and being like, what if we lead with private and we lead with paid? But we will actually have the option to host public podcast feeds. They actually are different, and like iTunes has these weird qualifications you have to meet, data that has to be sent to them, and so we are leading with selling private, but we will be the one-stop audio shop for people, and so you can host your public podcast as well on Hello Audio, which means what can we do with that? You're automatically thinking of, well, I haven't even told you like one of the coolest things that's going to be coming out, not again in this first phase. In this first phase, we're delivering audio feeds that are private, unique links per user, and you can control who has access. What's coming in other phases are things like calls to action. So if you host a podcast, a common way of like maybe countering the cost of the podcast is to have an ad. Lots of people do like Acuity, or what are other ones like FreshBooks, right? Some of the business podcasts that I listen to promote those companies in a little ad spot and offset the cost of maybe production. So what we're realizing is our digital marketers have their own shit to sell, right? And so obviously you're someone like Amy Porterfield, you can promote your big thing, or like Pat Flynn, right? They're usually promoting their own stuff. And so what we want, maybe some of the smaller podcasters to realize is that they could actually create calls to action that can end up in any of their audio products that will then you can set to expire. So what you would do is you would create a little ad spot and you would say, okay, 30 seconds, I'm pitching Encore Social, one of my products. And I would like it to run in my public podcast for a month. And I will drag and drop, right? And it goes in that feed and in the content of that feed. And it will just play. But you know what? People that have my Build a Better Beta podcast feed also should hear it. They pay me, but why wouldn't they want to know about this other thing I sell, or this, affiliate program that I'm promoting right now? And so this idea that we actually can control our own calls to action from an audio perspective is not what podcasters are thinking about right now. And that's where it's like, oh, because they're podcasters, they're not digital marketers. And so that reframe made me go, there are different ways that we could be using audio content, and I want to make it easy. Even if you've never launched a podcast, I want you to be able to sign up for Hello Audio and understand how you could use audio content. So when it comes to pay versus free, I think, like basically using it as a lead magnet, whether a use case is some of the other cases that people are using it, I call scaling intimacy, which is, maybe you have a fireside chat or like shower thoughts or like driving in my car, right? There are people that launch podcasts that are like that. But what you could do is have that be something that's paywalled and goes to certain customers depending on what they buy. But this is this way to create intimacy. But it could also be free, where you could say, hey, you want to hear my rants that it's private, it's not listed in iTunes, sign up to get it here. And now I have their email address, right? And again, because I have the calls to action, I can place it and sell them my other things. So I think the lines between free and paid, while I want people to start with paid, just because I think there's so much value, you're adding value to your offer with audio. You don't have to reinvent the wheel there, but there's a lot of really cool ways that you can create audio feeds that are free. Like Emily's, like a launch, free, right? And then she has her pitch, and this thing now lives, and she can do whatever she wants with that feed. And her pitch wasn't for a course, it was for working on them 101. So she could just have that be running. People could listen to that, podcast, short pop-up that's like 5 episodes. And at the end they get their pitch. And that's what's cool about it, is it's like, I think the unique thing about audio and why it's so fun to like show how important audio is there's data that's come out that like almost 80% of an episode gets listened to on average. That's huge. Ask someone on YouTube what they're trying to get as far as watch time. They're trying to get 1 or 2 minutes. Like literally, if they hit that, you have made it in YouTube land. And that just shows the mindset of the person who's listening to a podcast versus messing around on their computer watching videos. It's very different. And that's what we're tapping into. And just think about it. When was the last time you listened to a podcast? For me, it's when I get ready in the morning. Usually that's like my most common, but other times, like I'm on vacation by the pool, or I'm like walking my dog before, when we used to drive to work back in the day, driving to work. And so it's a habit forming thing where, of course, you have to fit that in your life, and you have to make choices to physically sit down and watch. Audio feeds, nope. It's just in your ear, phones in your pocket. That's why you're not distracted, is you don't have to be holding the thing that is the distraction. And so by reframing it and being like, we need to meet our learners where they're at, that you're helping them succeed. Because it's the way they consume audio is just inherently different. It's a different way of consuming content, and it is helping them. It's setting them up for success, really, is what it's doing.
I like it. Before this interview, I probably didn't have as much of an understanding or interest in audio,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I was always like, I listen to podcasts sometimes, but like, blah, blah. And we talked about my courses or things that I never really downloaded anything because it was a weird link.
Yep.
And now, like, you're making a really good case for why everyone should have, like, no webinars. I mean, I was over webinars for years. Those things.
Right.
Like, no one wants to hear 20 minutes of an intro about somebody and pictures of them skydiving, and no one needs that. And then now there's all these different use cases, and I'm sure that if you're listening to this, you are thinking of how you can incorporate audio into whatever your strategy is, paid, unpaid, halfway, just for an email. Like, there's a couple use cases that I was thinking, like, I don't know if you know Natalie Sisson. She's a digital nomad extraordinaire. And she did a book a few years ago, and her book was entirely made of blog posts that had been compiled over years. She picked all the best ones and then put them together into this book. And I'm thinking, like, even if you had a podcast that had been free, you know, like you said, they're not all gold, right? Like some of them are definitely not. So you could take the good ones and put them all into a private audio feed and charge $30 or whatever for that. I mean, there's so many use cases for using this creatively, and I think the ideas will keep coming, and you'll have all types of people using it for different stuff.
It's just funny because it's old school. Like if you think about it, like when I was explaining to my grandma like she actually gets this more than I sell courses online still, right? Yeah. So like, right, we talk to people in our family, they're like, I don't know what you do. I think now more than ever people get what we do, but I was explaining to her, she's like, what does your software do? And I was like, oh, well, you know how I help people with courses? Well, like we turn it into a podcast feed. And I know it's been really hard for like the older generation as well to get around podcasting, but that's also the point. The trend is moving towards audio. Like, I think it's like 30, I think it was last year, the study was 30% or 35% of Americans listen to a podcast regularly, highest it's ever been, right? Mm-hmm. So it's probably only going to get bigger. And this idea that I was like kind of explaining it like books on tape. Oh, I totally get it, right? Like it's not new thing. Books on tape was like a thing that my grandma's like, yeah, I learned how to be a real estate agent. Like I was like, see? And that was before we had handheld videos. And so it's a book on tape. It's not new, but now it's in a way, like in our mini computer that we take everywhere. Now I can get to it so much faster than logging into Kajabi, clicking on the modules while you're driving. I mean, it's freaking dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like, get them what they need. They need to hear the content. Like, how can you get them that fast?
And the other thing I was thinking is when you get podcast listeners to your actual podcast, you can't collect their emails most of the time. They just download it or they don't, and that's it. But if you are doing this, I was just thinking like maybe I should do a daily content show that's only like 10 minutes or whatever. But like Russell Brunson's one where it was like 5-minute marketing in his car or something on the way to work. And then I thought, well, if I could just do it public as a podcast, of course. But then I thought, grow my email list. That's what we got to do. We're here to grow our email list, right? So you'd say, okay, I'm doing this thing. You can listen to it. All you need to do is sign up.
It's private. It's VIP, right? Like you can totally frame it in this way. Like not everyone gets it. It's not searchable. It's just, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's a good way to grow your list too.
Yep.
Lots of benefits. You're welcome for all these great ideas I'm throwing out here.
That's why I shut up, right?
Awesome. Well, this is really great conversation, and we probably have to wrap it up, but before we wrap it up, why don't you just let everyone know where they can get this, where they can follow you?
So Hello Audio FM is the website that is right now taking a wait list people. You will also get this thing called the Audio Advantage, which is 43 ways to use audio to stand out in your market. So there's more than what we talked about. It's all written down for you. I know I covered a lot of things and a lot of ideas. And so you can use that to really just kind of get creative and think about how you could use audio in your business and how to blow the minds of your people and your customers. Signing up there. We have an Instagram that we literally just started. I mean, it's, launching a new thing. It's fun and shiny. The beta software is ready by mid-September. I don't know when we're doing a big public launch, but the people on the wait list will get the first opportunity. We have like 240 lifetime license users that will be testing it in just about 2 weeks. Very end of August, they're going to run through and test. We've been manually creating feeds for people right now. We're doing Tyler McCall's, the online business summit that he's running right now. And so I'm just, getting it out there and helping people get their what they want, which is to be able to access the content as easy as possible. So if you're interested in learning more about Hello Audio, go to helloaudio.fm. Tell me Beck sent you as well.
And actually a real quick question about, you were saying before about teachers. In the interest of helping anyone who might want to know more about that, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I also run a bit like a training company called Wealthy Teachers. So if you're looking to launch a course, you can go to lindsaypadilla.com. So yeah, if you like follow me on any of the socials using my name, you'll stumble across probably Encore Social as well. It's funny though, I thought you were going towards the how are educators going to use this, but I actually imagine like totally reinventing education for higher ed and elementary schools as well with podcasts. Like, dude, your teacher creating, you know, them explaining calculus, that lecture, and you can go home and do your homework with the lecture in your ears. Like, I mean, or right, your kids are learning, what's that crazy math that they teach people in the States? It's like such a weird way of doing math. And so the parents can't help their kids, but like, what if as a teacher, you created a podcast feed for them to like learn how to literally help their kids with their homework? So the use cases are pretty cool in education. So we'll be breaking into that market a little later. I have a lot of connections there and they're wanting me to create education licenses. And I'm like, that's like a whole other business model, but like, I will help my higher ed folks as well. You know, right? You could like listen to your like teacher's lecture, like walking to class in a mask or whatever they're doing right now. But yeah.
Well, it's definitely a crazy time for you know, teachers and students, and so like I said, if you're listening to this and you know a teacher, definitely get them in touch with Lindsay, because you know, you're the accidental entrepreneur, but there was a teacher thing that you had going for a bit.
Oh yeah, like my phrase, like I help teachers become entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs become teachers. Yeah,
there you go.
That's my little thing.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Lindsay. You are a delight as usual.
Yay.